of Parshat Shemot. Moshe Rabbeinu gets marching orders. Leich v'asafta es ziknei Yisrael. Go now and gather the elders of the Israelites, and you should say to them that God, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to you, and he has said, indeed, I have remembered you and what is being done to you in Egypt. These are the magic words, of course. Pokoid, pokadati. These are the words that Yaakov Avinu told the children of Israel that they would be remembered with, and these are the words that Moshe Rabbeinu used. Somebody once told me, and I don't know if this has a source or not, that Moshe Rabbeinu, as you probably heard, used to stutter. And he said when a person stutters, the hardest thing to say is two P's in a row, pokoid, pokadati. And Moshe Rabbeinu was stuttering, but the only thing he could say with perfect clarity was pokoid, pokadati. And when he said that, people said, wow, this has got to be the real deal. At any rate, Moshe Rabbeinu is being told that he should tell the people of Israel that he declares, God declares he will bring them up from the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaani, the Chiti, the Amori, the Prizi, the Chivi, and the Yevusi, a land that will be flowing with goat's milk and date and fig honey. We do not mention the Girgashites because their territory was not necessarily flowing with milk and honey. Moshe Rabbeinu hears from God now that they will heed your voice. They will listen to you. And the elders of Israel, together with you, will go to the king of Egypt, and you will say that God wants us to make a 3-day journey into the desert. Now, the king of Egypt, he's not going to listen to you. And he is not going to follow orders until I exercise my strong hand and perform many miracles. These, of course, are the plagues, the makas. And Hashem says, makas, plagues there will be. I will stretch my hand forth. I will strike Egypt with wondrous deeds that I will perform in its midst, and then he will send you. Not because of his own might that he will refuse, but because I wish to perform the miracles. And that's why I'm going to make sure he says no. So don't be despondent. And now, Moshe Rabbeinu was told something very interesting. In addition to all this, not only will the people go free, but in chapter 3, verse 21, Moshe Rabbeinu is told that this pyramid paved road of agony is going to become a road to riches. V'nasati eschein ha'om hazeh be'enei Mitzrayim. I am going to make this people very favorable. They'll find grace. They'll be amazingly charismatic. Be'enei Mitzrayim, in the eyes of the Egyptians. V'hoya kisei leichun. It'll come to pass when they actually leave, when they go, they will not go empty-handed. They won't go empty-handed. The Ibn Ezra says this was another amazing wonder. So in verse 20 we read about wonders. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to make niflois amongst or amidst the Egyptians. And here's another amazing wonder. The Mitzrayim, who hated the Jewish people, who persecuted the Jewish people in every way possible, suddenly are now going to be begging their forgiveness, and they're going to say, please, take these artifacts of silver and of gold. The Chizkuni says that this is similar to the notion that when a person has a period of indentured labor, an Eved Ivri, and then he goes free, that he has to receive something called Hanaka. We call it in English severance. So he gets like a severance package. This is the severance package that the Jewish people will receive on the way out of the land of Mitzrayim. And now we get into details. Moshe Rabbeinu is told by God, V'shala isha mishchenta. Every woman will request objects from her neighbor. Umigoras beisa, and from the person in whose house she lodges, she will ask for klei chesef uchlei zohav, artifacts or implements of gold, objects of gold, and objects of silver and gold. The smallest, and clothes. Why clothes? So some maintain that's because you need protection from the elements. They're going on a big journey. You need to make sure that you're well clothed. Others maintain that the clothes were extremely, extremely fine and beautiful, and even more expensive than the silver and the gold. V'samtem al b'neichem v'al b'nei seichem, you will dress your children. They will be bedecked in these beautiful clothes and in this silver and gold. V'nitzaltem es Mitzrayim, and you will thusly empty Egypt entirely. You'll leave with the wealth of Egypt. Let's take a look at Rashi. Umigoras beisa. So Rashi says, Me'oisa shehigora ita. The word migoras comes from the word ger or gora. So we're talking here about a woman, because that's how this psukim started. It says Vishala Isha. And since it's Vishala Isha, ger is a masculine expression of dwelling or living somewhere. Vigoras is a female expression. So the place that she will live, the woman she will live with, that's who she will borrow all these things, or take all these things. V'nitzaltem, and you will empty. Rashi says kitargumai. See how Unclus renders it. V'siroikinun, which means to empty out Egypt of its wealth. V'chein, and indeed we will see later in chapter 12, it says, Vayinatzlu es Mitzrayim. They emptied Egypt. And there Unclus will render it, V'roikinu yas Mitzrayim. And so we can also interpret and explain the words which are found in the Torah later on in chapter 33 of Exodus, and this is when we hear of the Jewish people sinning with the golden calf, and then the crowns that they received, the diadems that they wore after the giving of the Torah. It says, Vayinatzlu b'nei Yisrael es edyem. They were emptied of the ornaments that they received at Mount Chorev, at Har Sinai. So in other words, the crowns were taken away, and it's similar concept, emptied of. They had something, and then it was emptied of this. Now Rashi is going to go into a whole grammatical gerangle of what exactly this means, if the tzaddik is part of it or not. I'm going to leave that for now. And I'm just going to ask you the simple question. How come the women are doing all the borrowing here? It's not fair. How come the men aren't doing any work? So the Ibn Ezra says that the pasuk just speaks about the way things usually are. He says it's more typical for women to borrow things for ornaments than for men to do that. Men don't even ask for directions. They're not going to ask for ornaments. So that's what the Torah speaks to it, but it doesn't have to be specifically with women. It could be with men also. Now, this idea of vayinatzlu, or emptying, according to the Erd HaChaim, the verbiage here is from the language of mitzula, almost like a net. And Egypt was emptied, means Egypt was like fleeced of its wealth. Everything was taken away. This is the marching orders that Moshe Rabbeinu gets. Sounds like a great plan. You're going to come there, the people are going to listen, they're going to get excited, they're going to go with you. You're going to talk to the Pharaoh. He's not going to listen to Pharaoh, but it doesn't make a difference. That's because Hashem wants to bring His miracles into place. And then you're on the road to riches. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, Moshe says, no, they're never going to believe me. Are you kidding? I'm going to show up. They haven't seen me in nearly 50 years. Hi, I'm Moses, and God's talking to me, and we're going free, and you're going to be rich. They're not going to believe that. And so a whole argument is going to ensue between Moshe Rabbeinu and between God. And in the end, of course, God's going to win, but it's not going to be easy. Moshe Rabbeinu does not go easy. Fine. Let us focus on this business of the road to riches. So you should know, as a parenthetical thing, what's going on with this borrowing? Did they actually intend to pay them back? Clearly not. So is that not stealing? Is that not misrepresentation? Just take things? So the Ibn Ezra says, this is a mitzvah al yena, this is a divine mitzvah, it's a supernal thing, and we can't ask questions. That's the way God wanted it. You're right, it sounds very strange. And he says, what's the premise of this mitzvah? The premise is that everything belongs to God. And if everything belongs to God, God decides when it becomes yours or somebody else's. Now, as a rule, you cannot play Robin Hood and decide when you're going to garnish somebody else's wealth or affluence or distribute it, also known as communism. We do not believe in this. We do not believe in the forced redistribution of wealth. In fact, that's called stealing. Even sometimes when governments do it. But so the notion that we can just take things because, hey, it's God's world, and the poor people are God's children, so you're rich. That's it. I take what's yours and I give it out to them. Can't say that. As a rule, if somebody owns something, that's a divinely ordained thing. If they own it, that's hashgacha pratis. But when God tells you to take it, that's another story. Now, of course, people can come along and say, well, God told me to do this. People say all kinds of funny things. There's a psychiatric ward downtown that deals specifically with this problem. But here, what God really did say this to Moshe. And because God really did say it, if you want to know what the rationale is, that's the rationale. Rashbam says that the notion of borrowing was understood to be wink, wink, borrow. You basically abused us for 2 centuries. We worked to the bone, and we never got paid. So yeah, we're going to borrow. But it was self-understood. Both the Jewish people and the Egyptians understood very well that these objects were not coming back. It's just euphemism. It made it a little easier for the Egyptians to let go of their possessions, but actually it was pretty clear that was going to be the case. All right, at any rate, this is the explanations available to us. I'm going to direct you now to the Biurim book, to Siman Lamed Beis, the 32nd entry in the Parsha of Shemot. We're going to be on page Peches, which equals 88. And I want to share with you a fascinating medrash, which actually gets quoted later on by Rashi. So the pasuk begins by saying, "V'nasati eschein ha'am hazeh be'eni Mitzrayim." The pasuk doesn't say the Israelites will walk away with the wealth of Egypt. It says, I'm going to make the people find favor in the eyes of the Egyptians. It will suddenly become super charismatic. The Egyptians will be really excited to give them things. Please, take our objects. You don't want to borrow anything else? I mean, while you're at it? So the Medrash Rabbah says this. Masha Amarti LaAvram. I told Father Abraham, after I described to him in vivid color, or should I say the darkest of prose, how terrible things will be for your children. I said, and after all that abuse, and all that persecution, and all that bondage and slavery and exile, Yetzu b'rechush gadol, then they will leave with great wealth, tremendous affluence. Medrash says, Ani osid lasis eschem lechein be'enei Mitzrayim. That means that you will be very, very charismatic in the eyes of the Egyptians. You'll find incredible favor in their eyes, which is, like we learned before, Ibn Ezra said, a total pella. The Jewish life was valueless. Babies were slaughtered without the bat of an eyelash. And now all of a sudden the Jewish people find favor. They look down at them as animals, as vermin. And suddenly they're looking at them as if there's some royals, malachim, angels coming to visit from another world. What else can we give you? And he says this is going to be, Hashem is going to engineer the way the Egyptians look at things, give them a whole new perspective of the Jewish people, kedei sheyashilum v'yelchu maleim, so that they should borrow well and leave laden. Why? Why is that so important? Says the Medrash, kedei sheliyeh pischin peh Avram Avinu, so that Avram Avinu will not have a complaint to lodge, leimer to say, va'avodim v'inu esom, I will enslave them, and I will bring them pain and anguish. Kiyam behem, that you fulfilled. Very well. Fully. No hyperbole. Everything that you said was done. But then it says you promised they would go with great wealth. Like kiyam behem. They went with some wealth. They had some money to start a home, buy a first home, but nothing special. So because Avram Avinu shouldn't come along and say, hey, it's not fair. This is, you were supposed to meet us halfway. You were supposed to do something. God, you promised that they're going to leave with great wealth. So because Avram shouldn't say this, that's why Hashem has to engineer the perspective of the Egyptians, that they should look at the Israelites as if they're some kind of amazing people, and they're so happy to give their wealth away, so the Jewish people should leave with all this affluence. So the Rebbe says, Divrei HaMedrash Drushim Bir. The words of this Medrash really demand explanation. Ha'im kiyum ha'avtacha is then the fulfillment of the promise. And then, after all this happens, they will leave with great wealth. Hurak kedei sheliyeh pischim peh Avram Avinu. Is it just so Avram won't have what to say? That God says, I got to keep my word. I made a promise. I have to follow through. You know why? Because otherwise I have to deal with Abraham. I don't want to deal with Abraham. And then he'll come and complain and kvetch. That's all I need, are kvetching Avram Avinu. Forget about it. Give him. I'm just going to flick the switch and make him very generous. Really? Does God not have to keep his promises otherwise? Really, I wouldn't keep my promise. But you're going to kvetch. Fine, I'll keep my word. You gave your word. You made a promise. It doesn't make any sense. In order to explain this seemingly outlandish reality that the Medrash describes, Yesh lahaktim. The Rebbe says we need to preface here now. Let's sit down and talk for a minute. Do you know that yeshnon shtei drachim, that there are two ways lahasber es mataras so rechush gadol? There are two ways of understanding this road to riches. Pyramid paved, no question. Through all the years of slavery and abuse, 100%. But what was the purpose? What was the goal? Why did God, in fact, ordain that they would leave Mitzrayim b'rechush gadol with this great wealth? No, you're going to say, you're talking about what they're going to do with the money. But what was the rationale for giving it? Why was that an important part of this whole narrative? So the Rebbe says there are two possibilities here. Aleph. Number one is, Nitan liris bekach. We could see this whole idea of them giving all this money. Be'ikar einish l'Mitzrayim. This is a punishment for Egypt. Egypt was made very wealthy, the economic superpower of its time, and now all their wealth is lost. Why? And the answer is, Shehavidu es Yisrael b'farach, because they abuse the Jewish people. You abuse the people, now pay the price. So it's like a fine, and the fine is paid as punishment. Once it's being taken as a punishment, so it's given to the Jewish people as, well, some kind of severance package. It's given to them as in some way to minimize the pain that they endured. So it's as if to say, when somebody did something really bad, and somebody else is suing them now in court, what are they trying to accomplish? They want to punish them. So obviously you want to punish them, you're taking all this money, where should it go? It should go to the victim. If you talk about punishment, it makes no difference if they gave it to the Jewish people with a big smile, or with the greatest of grimaces, or the most profound of frowns. It doesn't make a difference. The important thing is you gave the money. The judge says, I fine you $500,000. The guy says, I don't want to give it. I don't care if you want to give it. You don't have a choice. That's the way it is in this country. You don't follow the law, you're going to the slammer. The person has no choice, gives all the money away. It makes no difference if he gives it with a smile or not. It makes no difference if they want to or not. God says the money will be given, the money will be given. So, in other words, God engineers things that the Egyptians want to do this. But really, if we talk about this from a perspective of punishment, of consequence, it's irrelevant if the Egyptians wanted to do it or not. There's another way to look at this. This is not about the Egyptians at all. This is primarily a payment to the Israelites. So when somebody went through a difficult experience, a harrowing experience, and they're suing, what are they looking for? What are they looking for? They're suing for this amount of money because that person was so evil, or because they suffered so much? Why did they launch the lawsuit? Compensation. You did these bad things, so compensate me. Guy says, well, I didn't really mean to. I don't care if you meant to. The doctor was operating at somebody, he left a sponge inside. Stories like this actually happened. And then there was a massive lawsuit, as there should be. It's massive malpractice. The doctor said, I didn't mean to do it. I was busy. I was overwhelmed. I was in a rush. I had to go to the next surgery. There's money to be made. I left the sponge inside. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? I'm going to sue you. That's what I'm going to do. But the doctor says, but I'm not a bad guy. And the victim says, I don't care if you're bad or good. I suffered unnecessarily. And that entitles me to compensation. So in the first case, if a person said, I didn't mean to do any of this, so what are you punishing him for? The punishment always has to be commensurate with the actions taken. If somebody did something with baleful intent, with the desire to harm and to hurt, then they should be given a serious consequence. If somebody did something inadvertently, never meant to, it majorly minimizes the amount of punishment that should be meted out. But if we look at this not as a punishment for the Egyptians, but compensation for the Israelites, al shneis ha'omel va'yisurim ha'koshes, and the years of tremendous effort and labor and anguish and pain and suffering that they endured, then it is important that the Egyptians give it willingly, happily. openly, then they will feel that this is a compensation, a payment. The Egyptians are saying, I'm sorry. Now, if you say, I'm sorry, and you send them a Hallmark card, that doesn't do very much. I'm sorry I ruined your life. Here's a Hallmark card. Yeah, thanks. Is there a check inside? If you did all these bad things to me, why don't you make it up to me? So, but to make it up to me, if you want to make it up to somebody, you want to make them feel better, it's important that they give it, they acknowledge we did the wrong thing. You know, the Armenians suffered a terrible genocide, but the Turkish never acknowledged it. And that bothers them till today, and that's understood. You don't acknowledge it. How do you not acknowledge it? There was people who didn't want to take money from Germany in Israel after the war. But the truth is, there was an enormous amount of money that came from Germany. That's why there's so many Mercedes-Benzes, even buses in Israel. Right? There was a whole big machlokes, a big argument. Should we take it? Shouldn't we take it? Are they actually contrite? They stole all our money. They killed our people. They killed our families. And part of it was that here's a country that felt it needs to compensate. It needs to make it up to the Jewish people. And they didn't give it with anger or frustration. They gave it willingly, and they should, as they should have. It's nothing compared to what they took, but the notion of compensation is only meaningful when it comes with a feeling of apology. So here's the thing. When you look at this as a consequence of punishment for the Egyptians, v'nasati eschein ha'am hazeh is irrelevant. Who cares if they find favor in their eyes? But when you look at this as compensation for the Jewish people, now it makes a lot of sense that the Egyptians should willingly do this. And the Rebbe suggests that this is the key to understanding our Medrash, especially the question we had, Shelo yeh pischem peh, so Avram Avinu shouldn't have things to say. Kedei lekayim es haftacha, in order to fulfill the promise, they will leave with riches. Hayadai bekach sheYisrael yikol me'mitzim es rechush shalei mitzayim. It would have been enough that they got it. How they got it? Willingly, unwillingly, irrelevant. It makes no difference. Did they want to give it or didn't want to give it? Who cares? Cash is the bottom line. You take the credit, I take the cash. End of story. God could miraculously transpose it from the Egyptian residuals to Jewish residuals. All of a sudden their bags were filled with gold. All right? It's not any less than the other miracles that happened. But in that case, if it would have been that way, then the Jewish people wouldn't feel good about themselves. And in order to feel the Jewish people fulfilled, in order for them to feel that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was actually being manik, he was giving them compensation, a severance package for what they endured. So therefore, that's the promise to Avraham Avinu. The promise to Avraham Avinu wasn't simply that the Egyptians will be punished. When God was speaking to Avraham Avinu, it wasn't about Egyptians. Who was it about? About Avraham's children. God says your children will be, in the end, your children will be taken care of. Well, if it's about your children being taken care of, it's about your children being compensated. Avraham Avinu, our father Abraham, Avihim, their father, Deirush Tevasam Shel Bnei Yisrael. He's our father. He's our protector. He's the one who's asking, what are you doing to my children? He would say, Vavadim Vino Yisam, enslaving them, putting them in exile, Hasevel V'Hayisurim, the suffering and the pain, Hayumanos Chelko Shel Bnei Yisrael Atzmam. That was the reality that they lived through. But the road to riches, didn't even happen that way. Indeed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did give the Jewish people riches. They left with wealth. It was done as a punishment to the Egyptians. If it's a punishment to the Egyptians, then it was never they left with riches. It's that the Egyptians were taken. The riches were taken, but not that they left with the riches or they felt good about the compensation. And that was the Pischim Peh that HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks of in the Medrash. Avraham Avinu said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Avraham Avinu, "V'nasati eschena om hazeh." Not only will they leave with wealth, it's about how they're going to get the wealth. It's about how the riches will come their way. HaMitzrayim yaniku es rechush l'bnei Yisrael. The Egyptians will indeed divest themselves of their wealth and give it to the Jewish people. V'ritzoyim hatoiv. They'll be happy to do it. B'sev upon him yafis. They'll do it with a smile. Shebnei Yisrael yuchlu liris bekach tashlum upitzos, so the Jewish people could feel that this is just compensation, not simply a stiff fine. The yir bekach, and so not only would they have the money, but they'd also feel a sense of nechama, of comfort, on the sivlom, on the terrible suffering they endured. And now we kind of understand the business of the road to riches.